Next, we have Tim with Vance Brothers.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. I'm going to give you a brief kind of introduction to microsurfacing. Many of you in the crowd have used it before. Some of you have not. Those that have not, I assume that before long you will be. And then we're going to talk about several success stories. One is a program, and then we're going to talk about some DOT jobs that have had enormous success over the years. I know kind of how easy it is sometimes to dwell on the negative, and today my goal is to focus on the positive and what makes programs and projects a success. So first of all, let's start off with a brief definition. Slurry seal and microsurfacing are laboratory designed mixtures of emulsified asphalt, aggregate, mineral filler, water, and other additives accurately proportioned, mixed, and spread over a properly prepared surface. There's three primary uses for these treatments, or for any non-structural surface treatment. First of all is preventative maintenance, and that's to try to deter or prevent distresses from taking place in good pavements. The second is corrective maintenance, where not only we're trying to prevent further deterioration of that pavement, but we're also trying to correct some deficiencies with that pavement. And the last, which we find ourselves working in more often than we care to, is in a reactive maintenance environment, or a stopgap measure, a Band-Aid. The problem that we find when we work in that environment is it can give the agency that specifies it, the contractor who applies it, and the treatment itself a bad name when it's improperly used. So the first two are perfectly fine. We really excel up on the preventative maintenance end of the deal, as evidenced with Dr. Buzz's data from NCAT. So keep looking for that stuff to come. They always tell me that no presentation is complete until we have a graph, and I'm getting mine out of the way early. Everybody's seen this pavement condition index before. You can see if you start at the top of that curve, which we've been preaching for years, you can continually add these thin non-structural surface treatments like slurry and micro to that pavement, and out well over 20 years you can provide great service and keep it up in better than fair shape. You can do that generally for an average of about $2 a square yard to maintain that. Okay, but look what happens when you go farther down that life cycle curve and you get into that poor category. Yes, with these treatments and some of the combination treatments that we use these days, we can immediately bring that back up into good condition. But it generally doesn't last as long, and it costs twice as much. And why is that? It's because you have to do so much preparatory work to it. So it's better to get this stuff at the top of the curve. You know, the NCPP been preaching that for as long as I can remember now. It's true, it works, and we need to utilize that method. Some of the benefits of use with both slurries and micros, some of them are overlapping, but microsurfacing has a few more capabilities. They both seal the surface and prevent further weathering of the underlying pavement. They restore surface texture. Our products are not roller compactive. We've got a very aggressive surface texture and very high skid numbers, as you'll see in some of the job stories that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. We provide a new durable wearing surface, so we are the sacrificial layer. You know, your major investment is underlying, we're protecting it, no oxidation, and we're the one taking all the abuse of the UV rays and the traffic and the weather. We fill cracks and voids, and we correct, with slurry seal, we can correct some distresses like raveling and light flushing. And please remember the word light flushing. I'm not talking about correcting bleeding. If we have too much excess asphalt out there, we can't fix it. But there are things that we can do with slurry seal and microsurfacing to choke that product back. And I'll tell you a little story at the very end of the presentation about how we did just that over in the state of Oklahoma. Now, microsurfacing does all those things as well, but also with microsurfacing we can stack stones. So we can do scratch courses and leveling courses and rut fillings and things of that nature. Where slurry seal is designed for one stone thickness, microsurfacing, we can stack those stones, lay in heavier applications which are going to be more durable for you, and we can reprofile that roadway. Now, we're going to go right into some of these success stories. And the one thing that I was telling Patty Hahn just a minute ago, in my 32 years in this industry, I've completed somewhere close to 1,500 slurry seal and microsurfacing projects. And through that time, I can probably remember a handful of failures. And I remember every one of them just like they were yesterday. That's terrible, but the percentage is so high on success. But we dwell on the negative. We're not going to do that today. We're going to talk about a program through the Office of State Aid Road and Construction here in Mississippi. And this is a separate entity than MDOT. They've got their own funding mechanism. They have their own roadway network. And we've been working for those. We did many years ago, but in a more robust fashion since about 2008. So that state aid program began in 1949. It's administered to 82 counties. What they do is they provide funding and administrative oversight for the construction and maintenance of non-state owned roads. And of course, they also administer special projects through federal highway as well. Now, state aid roads include collectors and distributor routes, and they generally connect to highways or other state aid roads that create a network of arterials through the county other than state-owned pavements. And I mean, it's a lot of miles. Historically, what they've done to these roadways is they've used a reseal project. About every 5 to 6 years, they would go out and chip seal these roadways. They'd do some leveling and patching, chip seal them, stripe them, put up some new signs, and go down the road. The way they run this, private engineers, consulting engineering firms work for the counties. You have the Office of State Aid Construction in Jackson. They have 10 district engineers. They deal with the consulting engineers and the agencies. So 82 counties, and I think there's 10 engineers between those. They oversee the engineers and the county. The counties are actually forced by law to maintain these roadways and keep them in a certain condition. And so you've got 3 different entities. You've got state aid, you've got the consulting engineer, and then you've got the elected officials all working together to make this program work. Okay, currently there's about 19,000 miles designated as state aid roads in the state of Mississippi. They've got a $175 million budget, which they only use $3.6 million for administrative costs. That's pretty meager. I know you guys look at that stuff, and I think typically, what do they figure, about 8% administrative costs for projects bid and stuff like that. Now, I know it varies from job to job, but that's a pretty meager amount to administrate, $175 million to 82 counties. Their funding source is from gasoline, diesel fuel, and kerosene tax, and that is the bulk of the revenue. Additional sources are some state tax revenue, which gives them about $3 million annually. Now, we're going to talk about how slurry seal and microsurfacing got started with the Division of State Aid. We used it for years and years and years for municipalities and county governments with municipal funds or just county term bid funds. In fact, 32 years ago when I started in this industry, we were working in Harrison County right here, down on the coast. We were doing stuff in Hancock County. So we've been here for years, been a presence, folks have known about it, and after we did some work for one of these counties, the elected officials desired a cost-effective alternative to chip seal for use on state aid roads. And the reason the county that started this felt that way is they had a bad chip seal project, or a bad experience with a chip seal project. Couldn't get the contractor to come in, sweep the rock, had a fatality accident, things of that nature. So it opened up a window for an alternative treatment to come in. Well, they put together a project and they bid it out, and it was a slurry seal job bid against a microsurfacing job. And it was a rather large job, and the reason they bid it alternately is they knew our company at the time was going to be the only bidder on the project. So they wanted to keep us honest by having an alternate bid. So we had to give them a good number. So we gave them that number on bid date, and we were $17,000 higher than the chip seal on a $1.86 million job. That board, courageously, all 5 of them voted unanimously to give that work to our firm, and we went out and did that slurry project. So they were pretty courageous, and state law says when you bid an alternate project or alternate product, you can pick the low from either alternate. You're not required to take the lowest bidder overall. You can go with the low from either alternate. We did that project. That project went extremely well and was considered a great success. Well, at that time, what we had were politicians, elected officials, pushing this treatment on the engineering community. The engineering community was skeptical because of their unfamiliarity with our products. But soon after we did this project, they started saying, hey, that went pretty smooth. No loose rock, no dust, no bleeding, no flushing. We're getting complimentary phone calls instead of complaint phone calls. And it really kind of took off like a prairie fire. And since 2008, until a job that was bid about 2 weeks ago, we've completed about 1,306 center lane miles. So that's 2,600 lane miles since 2008 in the state aid environment. You can see in this map, the red X's are the counties that have utilized slurry seals and microsurfacings in their state aid projects. The blue X's indicate where they've used it with their county funds. And I didn't bother to mention the municipalities that use it, but you're looking at 34 out of 82 counties that have used these products. And we pick up a couple of new ones every year. There's good competition here. The prices are good, as you'll see here in just a minute. So it is an ever-expanding program that is providing a lot of good service to the folks here in Mississippi. Now, just about every state aid project is very similar in their schedule of items or the things that they want. And that's maintenance of traffic. You know, there's post-driven signs just like you'd have on a highway department job. You've got to maintain those throughout the job. There's hot mix asphalt base and edge repair, which is your full depth repairs, and they also use it for leveling. They use a 12.5 millimeter, a 9.5 millimeter, and a 4.75 millimeter, depending upon what region of the state you're in and what's locally available. Then it will include slurry seal or microsurfacing. The emulsified asphalt that we use for slurry seal is a CQS 1H. It's a quick set process or emulsion, works very well. Microsurfacing, CSS 1HP, always polymer modified. Mineral aggregate, we have several sources. On one side of the state, we have the river that we bring a lot of materials down by barge. Central part of the state and eastern part of the state, we have a lot of rail that brings in our materials from Alabama. So just about every stone we use in the state is imported, either by barge or by rail. But they're still relatively economical. That's what, and then we have new thermoplastic markings. They put 90 mil on the center line, 60 mil on the edge line, new raised pavement markers that are paid by each, and we've got new regulatory signs. So every stop sign, every curve sign, every no passing sign, every sign on that job is replaced with new high retroreflectivity sheeting with new tamper-proof posts and things of that nature. And then, of course, mobilization is always in there as well. So that's what a typical schedule of items on a state aid job, that's what it contains. Now, this is just an example of some of the patching that takes place. Full depth patching is a must. Some of these county roads do have subgrade failures on them. Some of them have pavement failures. Saw cut those out, go down to suitable material, and bring them back up like you know we should. So we do that. We have the materials to do it. Then they'll also use these thin, smaller aggregate hot mixes to do leveling, where we need some more structure. When you've got I call it a hodgepodge of different deformations out there that's not really an ideal situation to level with microsurfacing. So we use hot mix asphalt. Some counties prefer to go out there and do some injection patching, like you see on the right there. What that is that's a rather large crack that had some cupping with it. So you had some rideability issues there. So the county comes in with their own forces, does some injection patching. And this particular county, I walked the road one day and they did an amazing job. Some of the other counties, not so much, but these guys did a great job. Slurry and micro application. Everything we have done to this stage has been with a type 2 ISSA gradation. So for some of you technical people out there, materials people, we're generally up around 98% passing the number 4 sieve. So it's a fine screenings material. We use a lot of rock from Alabama and we use a lot of rock from Kentucky, and they're very proven. They've been used for decade after decade after decade with a big history of performance. Typical application rate of that type 2 material on these state aid projects is 18 pounds per square yard of dry aggregate, plus or minus 2. So we have to operate within a window, or possibly have to go out and redo it to get it up to the poundage that they're looking for. So 18 pounds plus or minus 2 is what we generally use on state aid. I'm just going to show you a couple pictures of what the finished product looks like. I don't know that, I know we've got at least one elected official in here. I don't know that anybody in this room would have a problem selling that to their constituents. It's very attractive. It's got great friction values. And again, it's very economical. Just some good looks of the thermoplastic on the microsurfacing there. Now, when I told you a minute ago that we had 1,306 center lane miles completed since 2008, that really works out to 16.9 million square yards with 0 failures. There have been a couple of jobs that had some washboarding put in, from a defective spreader box that was corrected afterward, but there's been no failures at all in that amount of square yards. So that's a pretty impressive feat right there. Now, I know you're interested in what the costs are, and before I get into that, you got to know that dedicated funding is essential. I know you guys know it more than I do, but if you want a contractor to make $1 million investment in equipment, if you want an emulsion supplier to gear up with the tankage and the technical expertise to make these emulsions, if you want an aggregate supplier to produce the aggregates, the gradations that you need for these type of treatments, you have to have some dedicated funding because they are rather large investments. Once you have that, you get buy-in from everybody, from the contractors, the suppliers, the engineers, the whole ball of wax. But it does take dedicated funding. What are the costs? Average cost per lane mile. This includes everything. This includes the signage, the patching, the leveling, the slurries and micros. It includes the thermoplastic markings and RPMs, maintenance of traffic and mobilization. Out of, I forgot exactly how many jobs it is, it's 65 jobs or so since 2008. We're averaging $48,000 a mile, total complete. Now, the low end of that, I've seen them as low as $33,000 a mile, and I've seen them as high as $82,000 a mile. What really dictates that are the asphalt costs. How much hot mix is needed? How much full depth repair do we have to do? How much leveling do we have to do? Those generally are the indicators of cost. So again, and furthermore, to break it down, you can see that on average, the hot mix asphalt costs make up about 36% of the project cost. Slurries and micros make about 48%. And then the miscellaneous items, pavement markings, traffic control, signage, things of that nature makes up about 16% of the cost. That's the breakdown. That's quite a value. What are the contributing cost factors? Where is the project? What's the location? Quantity and type of work. How many mobilizations are required? Not only getting to the county, but how often do we have to move around the county? Generally speaking, all 5 districts get work, so you may be transporting your equipment and materials 20, 30 miles across the county to go from one road to the other. So mobilization costs can be high because if you're not laying asphalt, you're traveling, and traveling generally don't pay very well. Traffic control requirements, is it high volume, is it low volume? Aprons and intersections. Some consulting engineers like every little apron for every little driveway to be done. The beauty of these thin non-structural surface treatments is you don't have that bump like you do on an overlay, so you don't have to do them, but some prefer to do that. That is low production work and generally drives the cost up. The type and quantity of pavement repairs, production constraints. Are there roads that we can't get on, or are we doing a road with a school on it that we can't get on till 9 o'clock and need to be off by 2 o'clock? Things of that nature have a large bearing on it. Materials and freight, haul distance, not only to the county with these materials, but within the county. Those make a big deal, especially for the hot mix guys. Bid timing is huge. A lot of you guys, I think, know that and try to get your work out earlier in the year now. This year's kind of a unique year. It was really wet in the southeast last year. A lot of contractors lost multiple weeks due to rain. They carried some work over, so early bidding wasn't a big advantage this year to some agencies. But normally it is, and it's something that people don't generally get. Project engineer. Project engineer has an influence on that price, if we know who they are and how they perform their work. Let's talk about some of the other average costs of alternative treatments in the state aid system. Now, all of these numbers are available on the Office of State Aid Road and Construction website. All you have to do is sit and page through it online, and you'll see that. Chip seal, the average of the last 25 projects is a little over $46,000 a mile. That includes everything that we talked about earlier. The maintenance of traffic, the mobilization, the thermoplastic, the chip seal. That's the average cost. Thin lay asphalt. They've only done 5 projects, but currently they're averaging almost $104,000 a mile for thin lay asphalt. That includes the same type schedule of items that we see on slurries and micros. Maintenance overlay is what they call that, and this is the average of the last 10 projects let. You're looking at $192,000 a mile. So that's just not saying one's better than the other. I'm just showing you what comparative costs we see through the Division of State Aid. Can the success of state aid be a model for other agencies? I'd like to say yeah, and I'm going to show you an example of one. Elmore County, Alabama. And as I say that, I look down and Lindy has left. I'm going to plug what they do over there. They've got some A-trip money over there, or had A-trip money several years ago. And we did 37 miles for $1,800,000, which is $48,811 per mile. But let's talk about what all that job included. That job included guardrail removal and replacement. Had removal of thermoplastic markings, which is kind of getting a little overwhelming these days. And while I have the opportunity to talk about this, it's good to know that some thermoplastic does need to be removed, but not all of it needs to be removed. There used to be a rule of thumb, anything in excess of 4 inches. And that means stop bars, crosswalks, arrows, words, railroad crossing, things of that nature. And there are large, wide areas of thermoplastic markings where you have starting, stopping, twisting, turning traffic. That's where you see early wear on any thin non-structural surface treatment. So I do promote that those things be removed, but if you've got a 4-inch thermo, centerline stripe down the road, and it's not flaking off, you can get by with laying these products over it. It includes temporary paint markings as well. In Alabama, if you obliterate any pavement marking during the day, that has to be, it can't have temporary markers like tabs or foil back tape. It has to be paint with beads on it at the end of every day. So it included that. It had permanent thermoplastic markings, reflectorized raised pavement markers, and maintenance of traffic. And on this particular job, we had ADTs as low as 3,200 and as high as 6,800, which is a pretty good ADT. Of course, mobilizations, the microsurfacing, and within the microsurfacing, we did scratch courses on ruts that were less than 1/2 inch, and we did rut filling on ruts that were in excess of 1/2 inch. That is a very good industry specification. 1/2 inch and below, you can do a scratch course with a full width spreader box. When you get into 1/2 inch and more, you need to use a specifically designed box for filling ruts. And the reason they do that is so we can channelize with a V-shaped configuration box the largest particles of aggregate to the deepest part of the rut where you need the most stability. And then of course, naturally, we surfaced it all at the end. Very successful project, went very well. Agencies are both happy, both the county and the state. And since then, they've done many more A-trip projects. But Elmore, I think, was the first. And as you can see, it has a few more items in it than the state aid the state aid project, but less than $50,000 a mile complete for all those items is quite the bargain. Okay, I'm going to talk about another project now. We're going to come back to Mississippi here. Highway 494. This was done through an RFQ, and I've only got a few slides on it. It included maintenance of traffic, rut filling, leveling, and surface course with microsurfacing, new thermoplastic markers, and raised pavement markers. The cost for it was $560,000 for 8.26 miles, which you're looking at about $68,000 a mile. but that included rut filling. We totally reprofiled that 8.25 miles out there, and as an end result, we filled all the ruts, no more water, no more hydroplaning, and we left a very high friction surface behind us. This job went from Little Rock, Mississippi to the Lauderdale County line. Like I said, it's about 8.25 miles. We put down an average of 43 pounds of aggregate per square yard in 2 lifts. As of late last year, the friction rating on that, now this is a limestone aggregate, type 2 surface, friction value was 45.2. Very respectable number. I know most of you guys don't like to talk friction numbers, but I do. Now we're going to talk about one that's a lot older. This is Highway 61 in Tunica County, right in front of the casinos up there. It's about a 12-mile-long project that was done the same year Katrina hit, which is 2005. 2 lifts of micro. Again, we actually did a scratch course and then a surface treatment. We used limestone aggregate. ADT at the time we did this work was about 13,000 cars a day. Casinos were really booming then, more so than they are now, because ADT now is only around 10,000 cars a day. So folks aren't near as mad at their money now as they were then, looks to me like. The current friction rating after 12 years of service life is a 38.2. And again, this is a limestone aggregate, but we are not a roller compacted surface. We've got macro texture, and that's where we get our friction values. So for any of you states that try to eliminate the use of limestone out there, you may consider using some highly durable limestones with these type treatments, because they will provide you good friction values well beyond the surface life that's expected out of the treatment. And again, we're going into 13 years. You can see the picture to the right. That was taken immediately after the thermoplastic markings were put down. The picture here on the left was at 5 years of age, and the picture on the right was just right after 12 years. You can see some minor cracking going on in it, but one thing that you notice, it's still very dark in color. This job is very close to the river, and we're capable of bringing a black limestone down out of Kentucky, and it holds its color forever. I wish I could get it everywhere. It's just not economically feasible to do so. But it works very well, provides us a great high friction surface, and with great aesthetics. Now I'm going to give you one more job, and I think this one, probably out of all of them, is the most impressive, and you'll see why as we go through it. Tailored treatments on US 84 in Louisiana. Do we have any? There was a job story done in Construction News that really highlighted this project. And when I say tailored treatments, you're going to see why. We addressed wheel path rutting with microsurfacing. We did mill and fill because they had some pushing and shoving and some block cracking and things of that nature. We did mill with cape seal. Everybody know what a cape seal is? A chip seal style product followed by a slurry seal or a microsurfacing. And one of the other objectives was to restore the friction values. So this road was 18 miles in length, and it had a host of different distresses. And the thing that was beautiful about this project is that the agency didn't try to fix it with one tool. They incorporated all the different methods to address the distinct distresses that they had here. There were some things that microsurfacing weren't able to fix. So they did a full depth mill and filled on those. There were other areas that we did leveling and scratch courses with microsurfacings and a surface treatment only. There's some that we chip sealed and put a microsurfacing over the top of it, a cape seal. We milled and chip sealed and then microsurfacing. So there was a host of different things that went on this job, and ultimately, it was to improve safety. They had all kinds of problems out there. So it was a great job. What did it include? Construction layout. Over there, they require the contractor to go out and stake the project in Louisiana. That's something that's not typical in most other states, but that is required in the state of Louisiana. We had to remove thermoplastic and raise pavement markings and install the temporary paint markings the same day. We rut filled, we scratch coursed with microsurfacing. We did an 1.5 inch hot mix mill and fill. Again, we did a mill with a chip seal followed by microsurfacing. We did temporary pavement markings nearly every day. We had the striper come in and redo those. We put rumble strips in with chip seal. back then with a very large chip seal stone before some of the stop signs on the job. I don't know that they're as effective as some of the ground-in rumble strips, but that's what was worked into the job. We had new thermoplastic, mobilization, and construction traffic control. Here's a good idea of what the rut filling looked like. And when you rut fill, when they're over 1/2 inch deep, again, use the rut box. You can see it in action here on the left. And when you do it, do your outside wheel path first and then your inside wheel path. Layer them like a shingle on your roof to help that water get off of that roadway. And here's an example of what you can get when you utilize microsurfacing. It was kind of interesting on pre-construction day. I was there and it was raining, and I took that picture on the left. When we had final inspection, it was raining, and I took that picture of the same area. It obviously is very successful. No water in those wheel paths, no hydroplane, and it met the goals of the project or the objectives. Kind of an idea what the chip seal process looked like. Used a size 7 stone, so it was a larger stone, a 1/2 inch, with a CRS 2P chip seal emulsion. We did 1.5 inch mill and fill. How many of you guys have ever seen a job in your state where you've had chip seal, microsurfacing, mill and fill, all on the same project? You can do it. You can tailor those treatments to the distresses that you have. That's what's so beautiful about this job. Microsurfacing. And I love this top left picture. That is actually the project engineer. So happy with the job, he's willing to have his picture taken in front of the operation. I've not met many project engineers like that, but Mr. Gary Pantieri was very pleased with the way the job went and was willing to pose or play my little cat and dog games there. You can see some of the Cape Seal pictures here. One thing I want you to notice in the picture on the right, you can see that the chip seal has been swept. Not a lot of excess chip seal aggregate out there. You know, you have to be careful when you're applying chip seal not to over apply that aggregate, because it can be as detrimental to the product as under applying it. So make sure you apply at the proper rates and you can get some great results. Here again, Cape Seal. Again, look at the minor amount of chip seal stone that's been swept off that job. I mean, it turned out really good. Close up of what a Cape Seal looks like. You can see the chip seal on the left. Had several days worth of traffic before we put the microsurfacing on it. You need to do that. You know, generally you're not going to cover the chip seal up the same day you do it. Let some traffic get on there, let those aggregate particles get rearranged in their final position, let the dust dissipate, and then you can come back in a couple of days. The emulsion's cured, and then you can apply your microsurfacing. But we have the ability to flow into those voids and create a much more acceptable surface. You heard Dr. Buzz yesterday talk about combination treatments. That's exactly what that is. That's a Cape Seal. And the beauty of a Cape Seal is, or any combination treatment, whether it's crack sealing with a microsurfacing or chip seal with a microsurfacing, is that when you combine those treatments, you can address higher levels of distress than you can handle with either of those products by themselves. And you can still do that for about 40% of the cost to traditional treatments. That's one of the beautiful things about that. Of course, you can see some of the temporary striping operations on top, and then you can see the final striping on the bottom. Again, it's beautiful, and I think you can see it one in the right-hand corner down there, as it is typical just about anywhere in the South. The day you finish a job, somebody with a flat tire on their trailer comes driving down it and grooves your pavement for you. This is a letter that the district administrator wrote us upon the completion of that job. And it's very flattering, but it's what we in the contracting business strive for. I mean, we want our customers to be satisfied, and I think if you can read that, it's a little fuzzy, you can tell that gentleman is very pleased with how that process went. I'm not going to read that for time, but again, he's extremely pleased with how everything went and how the job turned out. This is, again, one of my favorite slides. I think Judith has seen me talk about this one before up at TRB, and it's keys to success. And proper site selection is where it starts. We are getting better at that every year. We still do find ourselves in reactive maintenance situations. And when we do find ourselves there, what I generally try to do is build reasonable expectations within the agency and make sure that we try to pick better candidates in the future. So site selection is huge. Good specifications. A lot of people have older specifications that need to be updated. In the last several years, I've worked with several different agencies, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Arkansas, and people like that have updated their specifications to address today's best practice standards. You need to do that. Division of State Aid was a perfect example. They were using a 25-year-old specification that didn't encompass the new equipment that was available, the new techniques that were available. They have since addressed that. They've got a new specification, and it not only protects the agency, but it protects the industry as well. And so not only do you have to have good specifications, but you have to enforce them. That's tough. It's easy to take the path of least resistance when you're an agency, especially when you're dealing with a product that you are somewhat unfamiliar with. If I had a nickel for every time a project engineer's told me, Tim, we don't know much about your product, we're relying on you to give us a good project, and if it works good, we'll use it again. Well, that's fine. I'm capable of going out there and self-policing. Not everybody in our business is capable. We need agencies to get up to speed. We need them to be educated, certified, however, and they need to hold the contractors accountable. They know what they need, they know what they want, and when you become familiar with it, you can then enforce those specifications. So we've got a lot of work to do. Industry is, I think, pretty good at training new contractors. It does take a while for them to gain what people that have been doing it for 32 years know, but the equipment is much more ergonomical, much more easy to operate than when I started years ago with all the levers and buttons and switches and valves that you had to turn on. Now it's all one button startup now. You calibrate it and one button startup. It's so much simpler. But again, good specifications are the keys. Industry will help you write those. Thorough mix design. I like to say that we want to use materials with a history of past performance. But even doing that, we've got to have good, thorough mix designs. And the agencies have to be aware of that mix design. They have to vet it, know that it's good before they approve it. Proper roadway preparation. Very rarely do we find ourselves on a job that doesn't need some sort of preparatory work, whether that be full depth patching, whether that be leveling with microsurfacing or hot mix, whether that be crack sealing. There's always generally something that needs to be done. Make sure that both the early stuff needs to be done, the crack sealing, full depth repairs and those things, make sure they're done. And then once the contractor gets there, the final surface preparation items are making sure you have a clean pavement. Because these products rely 100% on bonding to the existing pavement. And if the pavement is not clean, it will not perform. So surface preparation is a huge, huge item to consider. And I'm going to really talk more about that tomorrow in EDC because it is a major item. Proper equipment calibration, or proper equipment, first of all, on the job. Is it a job where you're doing ramps and crossovers on a multi-lane divided highway? You can get by with using a truck-mounted unit on that. If it's not that, and it's blow and go 8 Mile road, you've got to have a continuous paver out there. And amongst that, you have several different options. Is it a continuous paver with a monitor or without a monitor? Is it an MCAD system? You have some choices there. But most DOT work and 100% of the state aid work that I talked about earlier specifies a continuous machine. The reason that's important is truck-mounted units can apply the stuff all day long. You can make a good mix out of them without any problem, just like you can out of a continuous paver. But you do ensure continuity of mix when you use a continuous paver. You also ensure that you're generally going to have higher production levels. And the faster we move in, the faster we do the work, the faster we're gone, the happier the traveling public is about that. And another thing that a continuous paver does, reduction of construction joint. And I found in my years that the best way to install a construction joint is to eliminate it, if you can. So in a continuous paver can do that. With a truck-mounted unit, about every 800 to 900 feet, you're stopping, switching trucks, and you're creating a joint every 900 feet. Accurate equipment calibration. And I cannot go on nearly enough about that. And last year I had an epiphany. I've always believed in calibrations. I've taught them the process to many of people that come through the slurry systems workshop for decades now. And most specifications say that if you've got a calibration that you did 6 months ago in this calendar year, you can transfer it to this job. Well, I thought about that, and I thought about it, and especially with people being unfamiliar with our processes, when they see us calibrate, they become more familiar with our processes. They see how we take those component materials and bring them together in the proportions that are outlined in the job mix formula. So in other words, they get that warm, fuzzy feeling. Hey, I know these guys are laying the proportions that show positive performance characteristics in this mix design. They've calibrated. I watched them do it right in front of me. So we calibrate on every job we do. It takes about 2 hours. Very small amount of cost to do that. We do it right at our staging area. So it works good. But what I don't like to see, I don't like to see agency people pull up and sit on the tailgate and watch us calibrate from a distance. I challenge you to get involved, verify the weights, learn how that machine is putting those component materials together. It's a perfect opportunity for you guys to become familiar with what we do, because that's where it all happens. You can't subject us to hot mix testing through extractions and things of that nature to verify our proportions. That calibration is the key. So good mix design, thorough calibration, done in the presence of the engineer, or more preferably with the help of the engineer. And that'll help you with your success. Consistent, high-quality component materials. Some of you guys are just kind of nibbling at your programs right now. You're learning as you go along. You'll find out what materials work in your area, which ones have a history of past performance, and try to gravitate towards those. You'll have more success. Not saying that new sources of material aren't welcome, because we look at them and evaluate them every day. But we like to use consistent materials. In fact, 32 years ago when I started here on the coast, we were using a stone out of Alabama. I use more of that stone now than I do any other stone that I purchase. 32 years later, that is still a consistent, durable aggregate that we use in our processes. Contractor Performance, use a seasoned workforce. Yep, new contractors are coming, new people are making those investments, and they're getting out there. They need to train their personnel, and they need to make sure they can do the work properly. They can do that by coming to the workshop. Some of that stuff they have to learn on the fly. It is not something that comes to you immediately, but the contractor has to perform. And when they don't perform, the agencies have to level that playing field. And when they do that, not only do they protect their own interests, but they protect industry interests as well, which is important. Quality project inspection, just what I mentioned. I've seen people that are unfamiliar with our processes, and they're just literally mortified to get out of the truck and say anything because they don't know what to say. They don't know what to question. So whatever happens, happens. That's not what we need. I think industry, I think academia, I think everybody's willing to bring everybody up to speed on that, and I realize that takes time, but I think you have to embrace that concept, get involved, and we will all benefit because of it. Agency industry partnering, and I use that probably in a pretty loose term. It's not a contract, it's not a written contract, it's something that we do, from the time we are awarded the project and go to the pre-construction meeting. We're all after the same thing. We all want to provide the best project with the available resources that we have. And I've learned that working together with agencies yields you that more often than when there is a certain amount of adversity between the two. So definitely partner up. Information, there's tons of it out there. ISSA, NCPP, PPRA, there's more than you can ever digest in your lifetime. Weed through it, pick the stuff that's applicable to your agencies, get with agency. We're willing to help, and when everybody's up to speed, we will all benefit more. And if we do that, we won't end up with signs like this on our roads. Says, "Dear highway guys, no more rocks, this road still sucks." Is that the public perception we're looking for? I don't think so. Now, I can tell you what happened here. Is there anybody from Oklahoma in here? Just one, sorry. This was a chip seal job with a brand new contractor with a expanded clay aggregate that was done in late October. Brand new chip seal contractor, late October. Anybody see any red flags? A lot of them. Season limitations were over. We got a new contractor that really doesn't know what's going on. So what he does is he gets out there and he shoots too light of a shot rate. And all the aggregate ends up in the front yards of the people that live along that road. So over the winter, ODOT knew they were going to have a problem. So they called us and we went on the road with them. They said, "We got to choke this asphalt back because it's going to bleed pretty bad come spring when it warms up." So they put together a project, and we went out there and used a type 3 microsurfacing stone and put 2 lifts of microsurfacing at about 45 pounds per square yard, and we ran on the extreme lean edge of the mix design job mix formula to allow for some of that migration of chip seal emulsion up into the microsurfacing. It was an amazing success, and the perception that we want is lots better job with microsurface. Now, I didn't pay that guy to do it. He just did it. He talked to some of our hands, learned what the product was called, and that was a perception. That's what we look for. That's how things can go. You can see there's a lot of positive things there that we discussed. And again, out of 1,500 jobs, very few failures. We have successes every day. We have to embrace those. We have to look at them, determine what made those successes possible, and build off of them, and we'll be good. And source of information on this, you can go to vancebrothers.com, slurry.org, or National Center for Pavement Preservation. There's just a ton of information out there that you guys that have available, and they're great resources. And with that, I'll take any questions, and thank you for your time. Yes, sir.
So you said you do 2 lifts, double lifts of microsurfacing 43, 46 pounds per square yard. So do you have a few days in between, or how does that work? And second, the cost, would that be almost double of this single lift? And then for us in Virginia, single lift microsurfacing cost is almost 60-70% of 1.5 inch minute fill. If we do 2 lifts or double lift, that would exceed the cost of million fill on plant mix. So what's your experience in cost versus time?
Well, cost, I don't know if I'm going to address that.
Please. Question.
The question is first of all, how long do we wait after we do a scratch course or a rut fill before we put our surface treatment on top of
So
it?
2 lifts of microsurface?
2 lifts.
Yeah, so 43, 46 pounds per square yard. Is there a wait time?
We do have a 24-hour period of time that we wait before we cap that off with a surface treatment. What that does, that allows for return traffic compaction. When you're doing rut filling, especially with rut filling when you're using rut box, you generally want to crown that rut about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch for every inch in depth of your rut. And then allow 24 hours of traffic on that to get your return traffic compaction, and then you can put your surface treatment on it. Cost-wise, it can vary. You know, I know in several states we do about 45 pounds in 2 lifts on most of the roads, but it always includes some rut filling or scratch course. So we're addressing that rutting with the scratch course and then putting a surface treatment over the top of it. And it is proved to be very economical for the agencies that we use, much more economical than your traditional mill and fill. Any surface treatment, even a chip seal, if you're doing a cape seal, you want that to sit overnight and have some traffic on it before you cap it off.
What is the difference in the rates that you use for your scratch course versus your surface course?
With a scratch course, we use a full width spreader box, the same box that we use for applying the surface treatment. But what we change is the screed. And 15 years ago, we only used a metal screed to do that scratch course. Now we've evolved, we can use metal, or we can use a very rigid polyurethane. So for instance, if I'm doing a surface treatment, I may use a 3/8 thick by 5 inch wide polyurethane rubber with a 60 durometer, whereas if I'm going to be leveling ruts, I'm only going to be using maybe a 1/2 inch wide, harder durometer with 4-inch width rubber. So it's standing straight up and down, and what we're trying to do is just fill the wheel path. We're not trying to build up on the high parts. You know, the center of the lane and out near your shoulder stripe and on your center line stripe. We don't want to build up on those high parts, because what do we do when we do that? We exaggerate the depth of the rut, is what we do. Well, our product by the ton is very expensive. So there's no reason to exaggerate that rut depth. So that's why the reason they call it a scratch course, because you can typically see where we are scratching very thinly on those 3 high parts. And I address that tomorrow in the Everyday Counts presentation. So if you come tomorrow, we can talk some more about that. Any more questions? Well, thank you for your time.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.